Guillermo,
What's up, buddy?
what's up, brother? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Happy to see you today.
Happy to see you, man. Saturdays in the summertime. There's no combination of words I like better.
Yeah, man,
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
yeah,
buddy,
it's good stuff.
what's on your mind today?
Well, I guess it's somewhat contrasts with being thrilled about Saturdays in the summer, but I want to talk about anger. Because it's so central, I think, to a lot of what ails folks. Not understanding it, not being able to control it. And I could say just from personal experience, typical angry adolescent male, right? There were a number of decisions. There was a number of things I did that I look back on and just absolutely cringe that like I was in a state of anger when I was like 16 years old. And it's somewhere along the line, there was almost this reactionary this response I had that was just like anti-anger at all
Yeah.
costs. And I don't think that's healthy either. So anger has always been something that's really at the forefront of my mind. It comes up a lot, like I said, in sessions with folks and the clients I work with. And so coaching in the coaching world, how do you guys approach anger and the management of anger?
Great subject. Well, again, in the coaching world, because most of my clients are executives, and so they're either entrepreneurs, small business owners, or in the most majority are corporate folks. So, you think about a corporation, it's a body, it's a group of people. So you're working together with a group of people to accomplish a task. And if you think that you're ever going to, it's the rule of large numbers. If you think you're ever going to come across a person who's not an angry person, grow the heck up
Yeah.
because it's coming for you. And you're going to have angry customers. You're going to have disgruntled. I like the word disgruntled because it's kind of fun to
Mm.
say. You're going to have disgruntled people. And so being able to navigate it and almost learn how to do your own version of kung fu and deflection and trying to get under it and diffusing the anger is something that I work on tremendously. Literally yesterday, the subject was, they call it difficult people. It was like I have a difficult person that I'm working with,
Sure.
and we were able to kind of get to the bottom of it. And there was a lot of anger stuff that came up. So, yeah, without a doubt, anger in the corporate world and coaching anger, it's going to happen because it's a very fascinating emotion, and I actually think a very useful one.
Yeah, well, that I definitely want to get into the last thing you just said, the uses of anger. But I think it's the most fascinating, or yeah, I think it's safe to say it's the most
Yes.
fascinating emotion because one thing that's really unique to anger is so fight or flight, right? Fight or flight is stimulated by things that signal fear to us. And so there's a region of our brain called our amygdala, which is basically associated with every single negative emotion from fear to sadness to anxiety and things like that. Um, Anger is unique though, because while anger does activate that region of the brain, anger also activates the region of our brain that we associate with like reward or pleasure or motivation for that matter. So like the dopamine network in
Mm,
our brain is stimulated by anger. So there's this push-pull that exists when people are in a fit of anger, and that's one of the things that I think makes it so potentially destructive and even irrational, because it feels so energizing and even empowering, but it's also, there's a dark underbelly to it. I ask clients very often, particularly people who struggle with anger, what percentage of the good decisions you've made have you made while truly angry? And 99.9% of them struggle to come up with a single good decision they made in a fit of anger. So again, I do want to explore the uses of anger, um, but I also think it's just something to be so wary of because it also produces this sense of certainty. It narrows our vision. It's just such a unique emotion that, I really think we could spend 5 podcasts talking about anger, before we even broach on the utility of it, the uses of it. But how do you coach so you mentioned clients of yours dealing with angry customers or angry clients of their own, right? How do you coach them? What does that kung fu consist of?
well, I think his first thing is understanding that anger is a bridge emotion. And I really mean that, right? So I'm very into levels of consciousness, levels of energy, levels of awareness, levels of maturity, levels of perception, so many different ways of saying it, and kind of universally agreed. One of the lowest forms of consciousness or energy or being is that of the victim, that of, you know, the, whatever we want to call it. There's so many
Sure,
different
sure.
ways of calling it, the
Just
victim
being
or the slave.
helpless.
Helpless is a fantastic way of describing it.
Yeah.
The next step above helplessness is a form of combativeness, which is often fueled by anger.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's, I'm mad as hell and I just won't take it anymore, which is a great line from the movie Network. But it's actually useful. Like that's actually from again, this is your world more than my world, psychology. That's a more healthy state than that
Mm,
of the helpless victim state. So
right.
again, viewing it as a bridge, and you might have said the word earlier, but I couldn't help myself, but viewing it as fuel. Because
Sure.
fuel is a fascinating thing, right? What can you do with fuel? You could put it in a car and travel across the country, or you could burn your house down with it.
Right.
So
Right.
it's kind of an interesting thing about how you're modulating and using
Yes.
this emotion, or even like on the sports field where it's like, come on, guys, let's get angry.
Right.
Come on,
Right.
because it's a focusing thing. Do I think it works long term? Do I think it's catabolic and adrenaline oriented and cortisol oriented? No, it's a short term thing.
Yes.
Like, but it's useful. Like when somebody breaks into your house, be angry.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's I think that's perfect. The analogy you used about fuel, because anger is fuel, anger is poison. I don't think, there's some significant, like, I don't think the civil rights movement, for example, ever would have taken place
Mm,
in the absence of healthy anger. I think people sometimes use anger um, to leave unhealthy relationships. I think people use anger to stand up for themselves, and that is the utility of anger. And it's irrefutable that in those instances there is a real power that it can hold. And in CBT, and you kind of mentioned this a second ago, the sort of the stages of consciousness you mentioned, we like to think of primary versus secondary negative emotions, right? So primary negative emotions, things like sadness or fear or anxiety, right? We think of them as like meek, and to use that word again, sort of helpless emotions, right? So often we'll resort to these secondary negative emotions, things like anger or defensiveness or resentment or even jealousy, because there's a certain empowerment that comes from experiencing those emotions. It makes us feel in charge in a way. And so it can help us move out of that sort of, again, sort of meek primary set of negative emotions into this space where we feel like we have some authority, some agency over our life. Because again, think of the analogy you used a second ago, somebody breaking into your home, right? So fight or flight,
yeah.
fight, flight, fawn, freeze, right? So it's really four parts: fight,
Yeah.
flight, freeze, and fawn. Freezing and fawning are probably not, reactions that we idealize ourselves having in a situation like that.
Hmm. It's really interesting. Just to kind of complement what you said earlier about secondary emotions, usually the underlying emotion of anger is fear. Now,
Mhm.
saying that to a person when they're angry,
What are you
takes some
afraid of?
guts. What'd you say?
What are you afraid of?
I listen. I mean, I could do it. I could do it with certain people. I wouldn't do it with a person who it
Sure.
looks like they're really ready to hit you with the tire iron. But it's actually true. Like you're angry. Usually, when a person's angry, they're afraid of something. What are you
Yeah,
afraid of? I mean, if you
right.
have the guts to do it, or if you have the right ability and the right rapport with somebody, whether that be in business or family or whatever, it's actually a really good strategy. And so, I was actually coaching somebody on it yesterday or 2 days ago, where I said they're actually afraid of something. What do you think they're
Mhm,
afraid of? And it was so much fun to watch her go. She's afraid that we're coming for her job.
mhm.
Oh, wow. She's afraid that, the work will never end. She's afraid that she'll never get recognized. And I was like, so she's really not angry. She's like, no, she's afraid.
She's
And
afraid.
it's
Yeah.
just how it's manifesting itself. It was
Dude,
so cool to watch.
yeah. Dude, that's
Uh,
that's the great unlock where if you're able to identify what lies beneath, because, additionally, anger and empathy are not compatible with one another. So when a person is full of anger, it in inhibits their ability to, just see the world from another's perspective. And so empathy asks sort of like, what happened to this person in your case, but anger asks what's wrong with this person. And
Nice.
being able to even introduce questions like that in a moment when someone is angry, like, "What happened?" What are you afraid of? Or what lies beneath this rage that you seem to feel? Because again, it's never anger. Anger is not it doesn't go alone, let's say, right? There's
Mm,
always do you ever see the movie Inside Out?
love it.
Yeah, great
Love
flick.
it.
I really think, like, it should be in, like, middle school curriculums, like, shown to every child just to start learning about emotional intelligence and whatnot. But those characters that represent all the different feelings, I don't remember too much of, like, the details of the movie, um, but, the character of anger, I don't think he's ever presented singularly in any of the scenes throughout the entirety of the 2 movies. He's always with another character, and I could be wrong about that, but and that just might be my own bias that interfered with my ability to fully, objectively watch the movie, um, but there's always something underneath. There's always some companion emotion. Maybe that
I
anger is
like it.
protecting, or maybe that anger is trying to facilitate, but there's always something else.
I like it. And again, there's just using that movie, and again, I highly recommend it to everybody. There's a time and a place for him to show up where he's actually useful. Like there's no
Right,
other choice but to
right.
use that anger. And again, he's used kind of like going back to that fuel, as like gunpowder or gasoline or whatever. It's potent. It's potent stuff.
Yeah.
So a little bit is okay, but too much, you're going to burn down the world. And again, it's one of those things where I always talk about emotions like, allow it to visit, but don't
Mm,
pack up, don't set up the guest bedroom, for the weekend.
right,
And,
right.
to me, all roads lead back to tennis. I get very angry at myself for hitting a bad shot. Do you know how long that anger lasts for? Take a guess.
Hopefully before the next serve.
Oh, I've
It
got it down to
expires before the next
I
serve.
think I've got it down to
Second.
seconds now, maybe 2 seconds.
Yeah,
It's like it
yeah.
comes in and I let it go. And that took
Right,
practice. It really did. And
right.
again, whether it's a tennis court or in the situation that I'm in a lot, the corporate setting, or your situation, which is like people's familial stuff. Like I'm still angry at my mom, and you're like, how are
Sure.
you going to let this thing stay in your house?
Right.
You've not only set up the guest bedroom, you're building a second floor.
Mm,
You're building a wing, and you're going to let this
right.
anger become part
Just for
of.
your anger to take up residence.
Yeah, like you're allowing it to take hold, and there's other states, there's higher states that you could be that are more service oriented, or in kind of the world that I'm in, a lot of like this win-win, creation and connectivity where it's like we're all on the same team here. And I
Mm,
think that's really the interesting thing of anger, because going back to this, maybe okay analogy of somebody breaking into my home, oh, we're not on the same team. Like, you're
right.
trying to do me harm. That's the reason why I'm
Sure.
afraid. And I think in the corporate world, and we call them matrixed organizations, right? There's so many different divisions, and there's so many different departments, and there's so many different people who all have different motivations and different wants and different needs. And you're like, hey, 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 this is me against you stuff. And
Mm,
my job is to kind of diffuse and remind everybody, guys, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Like
right,
this is
right.
a team. This is a one cohesive unit. And being angry at each other, good luck with that. Good luck with a bunch
Yeah,
of people being on a rowboat or any other type of situation that they need to get out, and they're all pissed off at each other. Where are you
right,
going? Where are you going to go?
right.
You're going in circles, man.
Yeah, yeah, in corporate relationships, but then let's bring it home, in spousal relationships, in familiar relationships of any variation, where, in theory, we are all on the same we want a happy, healthy family, right? So why are we angry? What is interfering here with the dynamic that is leading to anger? And I often think in a lot of relationships, and just generally speaking, it's like the people who trigger us are often like our best teachers. And what I mean by that is, if you say something that triggers anger in me, very often what's happening is I'm not responding to you. I'm responding to something from my learning history or from my relationship history or something like that, where I was deeply hurt. And in this moment, all of that hurt, all of that fear is being projected onto that which you just said. And so now I'm having a reaction that is inconsistent with the information coming in, or maybe disproportionate is a better word, with the information coming in. And now there's this strain on our dynamic, because I mentioned those primary and secondary negative emotions, right? And this is really where the rubber hits the road on that as a tool. Is if I say to you, "Hey, Will, I was really hurt when you said XYZ." How are you going to respond to that?
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Okay, okay, that's going to likely bring us closer together in some way or another,
Yeah.
right? However, if I call you every name in the book, 4 letters and otherwise, and, yell and point my finger and, flex on you or something, how are you gonna respond to that?
I'd probably get a little bit more defensive.
Sure.
I'd probably try to give you a taste of your own medicine.
Right.
I'd want to be combative.
You'd wanna be combative, and that would be totally normal, because when someone is angry towards, we have these things called mirror neurons, right? Mirror neurons become activated when we are basically processing the emotion of someone else, which is interesting because when we are angry, there's less activation in the mirror neurons. That's why empathy kinda goes out the window when we're angry. But if I start screaming and yelling at you, chances are you're going to respond in kind, right? And now you have no empathy for me, I have no empathy for you, and we're just going to escalate until, someone's on the ground unconscious, right? Oh, God willing, that's not the case. But here's the thing, is the expression of a secondary negative emotion almost always creates more distance in a relationship. It almost always pushes the people we're relating to further away. Whereas the expression of a primary negative emotion, again, sadness, hurt, fear, anxiety, right? If I tell you you did something that hurt me, you're more likely to respond with empathy than if I scream and yell at you. And
Wow.
so, again, anger can be fuel, sure, but there's a reason why so many faith traditions from Buddhism, I mean, in the book of Matthew, Jesus talks about, he's talking about the 10 commandments and thou shalt not commit murder, right? And he says, I tell you the truth, any of you who've had anger in your heart towards your neighbor or your brother has committed murder in the eyes of God, right? That's a really strong discouragement of this emotion of anger, because these ancient traditions, and Christ knew the destructive power of anger, right? But at the
Wow.
same time, there's so much about righteous anger that, it's really hard to distinguish between the two. So I'm gonna throw it back to you. I'm gonna give you the question of the day here. How do you distinguish between anger that is productive versus anger that is destructive? I know. I like I said, question of the day.
Yeah, productive anger versus destructive anger. Well, the first thing that I would say is that because I believe that this is actually a step in, going up in kind of the levels of consciousness, everybody wants to, we can't help ourselves, get rich quick schemes, we want to go from 0 to 100. We want to go from white belt to black belt immediately. There are steps that you have to go up through regarding, lower states of consciousness to higher states of consciousness. And I don't think that you want to skip over anger. I really
Mm,
mean that. I don't think you want to skip over it, gloss over it, because then that turns into everything is awesome, everything is fine, it's
right.
coping. It's one of my favorite scenes at the end of Animal House when Kevin Bacon is going, all is well, all is well. And meanwhile, there's a riot going on. Everything's
Right,
not
right.
well. You're basically lying. You're
Yeah.
basically lying. And I don't know what you call that psychologically when a person, you'd have to help me out on this
Suppressing.
one.
It's
What do you call
essentially
it?
a form of suppression where,
Yeah.
like, I'm feeling angry and I suppress it because, again, and I harken back to my own experience with anger, where that's probably been one of my coping mechanisms, particularly when I was in my 20s and 30s, was just suppression at all cost. And the damaging part of that is it's gotta go somewhere, and it's gonna come out some way. What does Malfi say in The Sopranos, Dr. Malfi, which if you have not watched The Sopranos and you're of age and, you know, you can watch The Sopranos. I highly, highly recommend it. And the central relationship in that show, I argue, is the relationship between Tony and his psychiatrist, Dr. Malfi. But she refers to depression as rage turned inwards, and that really resonated with Tony. But that's, and I'm sorry to cut you
No,
off
no, no, it's great.
because I think that's what you're kind of alluding to is this form of suppression of anger that is in and of itself wildly unhealthy.
Like 100%. Well said, man. And again, it's all about dosage. It's all about how much anger and for how long and the direction of it and how you're going to channel it. But then moving into these higher states and knowing that they are like, a higher state than anger is actually courage,
Mm,
because it's so interesting because courage can't exist without fear. And we talked about how close fear and anger are, but you've decided like, I'm not going to be angry anymore at this situation. I'm going to be brave enough to overcome it or to let bygones be bygones or to realize that I don't have to be right. What's more important, you being right or having peace, because that's where we're ultimately trying to go with these higher levels of consciousness of, reason and love and joy and then ultimately peace,
mm,
because that's that's actually the answer for, I think you said it earlier, of like making good decisions.
mhm,
Like, do you want like how fun would that be for me as an executive coach? Because I'm totally stealing this from you in real time. Um, how many good decisions have you made when you were furious?
mhm, right,
And, they're like, "Well, none." And you're like, "Great." How many great decisions have you made when you were feeling calm, cool, collected, a feeling of love, a feeling of togetherness, a feeling all the kind of soft stuff that I love? And I know the answer already. You're going to make better answers. And I think as a tool that I really would like to help people understand is this very simple saying of, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. When
sure,
somebody cuts you off in traffic, sometimes they just cut you off in traffic. It's not Mount Everest, you know what I mean? It's a
yeah,
little transgression, but you got triggered because whatever that, now we're getting deep in, this is and gonna have to go way deeper than this subject. That's bringing up something inside of you that somebody
mhm,
has, wronged you. I've been
right,
wronged. And you're like, "Well,
right,
why are you so weak that a person who's cut you off in traffic has done that?" And I do have to steal a line from one of my favorite comedians, Ricky Gervais. And he has this line because I don't think that it's, well, maybe you're going to have to help me out here. Um, Being offended versus anger, because I think they're kind of cousins without a doubt.
sure,
And he says, you're not allowed to say the words, "That's offensive." You have to say the words, "I find that offensive."
mm,
Because there is some behavior that one person's going to do that is going to make you angry. And then
mhm,
there's another person who's just going to be like, "That doesn't get to me
whatever,
very much."
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, and that kinda goes back to what I referenced earlier, where very often our reactions in the present are actually responses to that which has happened to us long ago. And what one might find offensive, or if I get cut off on the highway, and I flip out, what does that reveal? Because what's the big deal, dude? You got cut off on the highway. It's my life is not in danger. Um, it's not going to change my estimated time of arrival wherever I'm going. It's just somebody made a move that might not have been the wisest. But if I'm flipping out about it and use the word slave, now I've just sort of allowed myself to be enslaved by the actions of another, at least on an emotional from an emotional standpoint, right? And who wants to do that? Um, so so being aware our you of our agency, of our independence, whether it's anger or really any other negative emotion, and we probably should get into that more so on the pod in the future, is just having ownership over just our emotional experience, where we don't have to surrender our agency. We don't have to surrender our feeling state or our just overall sense of well-being to another. Because listen, man, one of the fundamental tenets of own your life is own your emotional experience to the furthest of your ability. Like, that person on the highway doesn't need to steal your peace. You don't need to surrender it to someone who says something that you quote find offensive. You have liberty, you have freedom. Use it.
I love it, buddy.
Yeah, man.
So good
Good
to
stuff,
see you.
Guillermo. So good to see you, brother. Have a great week, and we'll catch up soon.
Till next time.
Later, bro.
What's on Your Mind is a production of Oil Media. Subscribe for more reflections, blogs, and podcasts at oylmedia.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.